So if you're in English class, at one point or another, you'll be asked to do an oral presentation. Let's assume that you're starting from scratch, and your first approach to putting together a presentation is very much the same as when you write an article or any type of paper, and much of the work process is similar too. Unless you've been given specific instructions, the first thing you need to do is obviously decide your topic and then narrow that topic down to something specific enough that you don't have to spend forever working on it. We're not at university level yet. Now, if you've got completely free reins, you may choose to do a personal presentation or one that is research-based. A personal presentation could be about one of your interests or hobbies, or about an experience that you've had that you want to share. Here, you probably don't have to do any research, though you might want to in some cases, but usually you can get right to structuring your presentation once you've decided your topic. If you do a research-based presentation, however, you may want to start by phrasing a research question to keep you on track, just like when you write a research paper. Once you're set, you start doing your research. As always, when you do this, you take notes and save whatever sources you're using, copy internet links, and write down book titles and page numbers. Check out my video on how to write an article if you want more tips. Links down below. Whatever type of presentation you're doing, whether it's research-based or personal, there's a couple of things that you should consider and keep in mind during your prep work. First, what's the purpose of your presentation? What is it you want to do? Do you want to inform, to share your interesting findings on an interesting topic? Is your presentation of an argumentative type? Do you want to persuade your audience? Do you simply want to share your own experience or your passion for one of your interests? Think about your purpose and keep that in mind while you prepare. Second, you need to consider your audience. For whom are you presenting this? Since your audience will be your classmates and or your teacher, you'll want to consider how much they may know about whatever you're talking about. Are there things that you need to explain? Let's say that you're talking about a certain book. If you know that everyone who's listening, has already read that book, there's no need for you to explain what it's about. You can just go straight to whatever you want to say about it. Now let's pretend that you are talking about some new research you found on how to possibly treat Alzheimer's. Can you assume that everyone in your audience knows what Alzheimer's is? Probably better to start with a brief explanation. To give you a real example, I once had a student who held a presentation about FIFA. At that time, I didn't know what FIFA was. I had no idea, and it took me about half the presentation just to understand what the student was talking about. And that's a shame. If the student had simply started the presentation by saying something like this: FIFA is an organization that governs and develops the sport of football worldwide. It is also the name of a football game developed for PlayStation in the year so and so. Now, this would have ensured that everyone was on board from the start, and it would definitely have been a lot of help to me. Now, let's say that you've chosen your topic, you've done whatever research may be needed, you know what you want to say with a presentation, and you've considered whom you're speaking to. So how do you do the actual presentation? A presentation should have structure, just like a paper that you write. So you could do an outline with subheadings, just like when you're writing a paper. The difference here is that you don't write the presentation down the way that you write a paper. At least you shouldn't. When you do your presentation, we want to hear you talk, not just read out loud from a paper. Of course, everyone is different in what sort of preparations works best for them, but what you should keep in mind is that in order to talk about your topic, you need to know your topic well. You need to understand what you're talking about, what you're saying. This way you can speak more freely about it. It doesn't matter if you get slightly off track. If it helps you to learn and to remember what to say by writing it down, then by all means, take the time to write and to think about how you phrase things and use correct grammar and all of that. But what's important to remember is that once you get to your presentation, it's all right if you don't say things exactly the way that you wrote them down. It's much more interesting to listen to someone who speaks freely and naturally than someone who reads from a script. And I'm sure I'm being a bit of a hypocrite right now, since I am at this moment literally reading all of this from a script. But anyway, back to you in your presentation. Let's do an example. Let's say with your presentation you want to spread awareness of the importance of using a helmet when riding a bicycle. You want to do this by telling a story of when you were run over while riding a bike and how the helmet probably saved your life. And you want to throw in some statistics and facts about helmets for good measure. Of course, you'll start off with an introduction to let the audience know what the talk is about. You could start by asking if they themselves usually wear a helmet while biking. This would be a good way to connect with the audience. Next, you'll be telling your story. It may be a good idea in this case to write down some key points of the story that you can then look at to keep you on track. Could look something like this. From this, you could tell the story that it was very dark. I was riding my bike. I came to a cross section. I had the green light, so I went. There was a car coming that was crossing my path, and the car didn't stop. I flew through the air and I landed face first on the ground. And when I got to the hospital, the doctors told me it was very good that I was wearing a helmet. Now, that's a way to speak freely from these little keywords. And then next in the presentation, you want to bring up some statistics that you found on bike accidents where helmets have been used or have not been used. And lastly, you decide to advertise the cool airbag helmet called Hefty. Of course, for each of these subheadings, you could have little extra notes like these you have here, but you shouldn't have more. The notes that you're using during your presentation should not consist of full grammatically correct sentences, but just be keywords like these that you can look at quickly and remember what you were going to talk about next. And again, it's perfectly fine if you don't say things exactly the way you planned them, as long as the information gets out. Many people like to have a PowerPoint with their presentation, and a lot of teachers will demand it for certain assignments. Say you have to use a PowerPoint. I love a good PowerPoint, as you can probably tell. The purpose of using a PowerPoint with your presentation is to keep the audience, help the audience keep track of what you're talking about. If we go back to the example, these subheadings that we have here could probably work fine in a PowerPoint with maybe a few more keywords and maybe pictures under each of them. It's important that the PowerPoint doesn't contain too much. If a listener suddenly sees a lot of text pop up, they usually have to choose whether to read it or to keep listening to you. But if you have only a few important keywords along with some interesting pictures, the listener can take those words in quickly while still be focused on what you are saying, and the PowerPoint simply acts as a tool to emphasize your words and to remind the listener that this is what you're talking about right now. Finally, before you do your presentation for your teacher and your friends, it's good to have 1 or 2 practice rounds to yourself to check that you're really prepared. And if you've run into any new words while putting a presentation together, you should probably also make sure you know how to pronounce them, since English is not your first language. And lastly, remember, chill. Presentations are scary for a lot of people. Remember, we're here to support each other. A presentation is not a test to see how well you can remember and deliver a script that you wrote. You're simply talking about something that you know well, and this is something you probably do all the time when you're with friends. Talking, that's all it is, talking. Sharing something that you know well with people that you know well. If you forget what to say, that's what your notes are for, and if your notes can't help you, then that's just a learning experience for next time. How could you have written your notes in a better, more helpful way? If you stumble over words and you can't pronounce them, well, that's something that happens naturally whenever you speak anyway, isn't it? It's fine. The more natural you sound during your presentation, the more enjoyable it will be to listen to. I hope you found this video helpful. See you next time.